Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar session, Technology Trends for Nonprofits. My name is Kim Roque, and I'm with the Lutheran Services in America team. And we're pleased to offer our webinar today in partnership with the Lutheran Financial Managers Association, and are glad so many LFMA members could join us today. I'd first like to introduce Bob Wydra, CFO of Lutheran Services Florida and President of the LFMA Board of Directors. Bob, it's great to have you today. Would you like to
Thanks, Kim. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Wydra, CFO for Lutheran Services Florida down here in Tampa. And I am on the board of Lutheran Financial Managers Association, which is an association of finance managers throughout the country. And we get together once a year for a 2-day seminar. This year's seminar is going to be in Orlando, November 9th through the 11th. And it's generally a fairly small group of 30 to 40 professionals that get together. We bring in professional speakers such as RSM to talk about different topics such as nonprofit accounting updates, economic updates, cyber, and other current trends that are of interest. So please pass the word on to your CFOs and to your controllers to look for information on this conference that's coming up. If you post your email address in the chat box, we'll make sure to get information to you, or you can reach out to me at bob.wydra@lsfnet.org, and I'll make sure that you get some information, and I'll post my email out there for you. But today we're excited to present to you RSM. RSM is the 5th largest CPA firm in the country, and they focus on the middle market organizations like ours. And we have used RSM for our audit now for the last 3 years, and we've used them in consulting roles for various projects over the last, probably 10 years at different organizations that I've been with, and they are phenomenal, which is why we wanted to partner with them to talk specifically about trends that they're seeing out there in the marketplace. So with that, I will turn it over to Michelle Juliana at RSM and let her begin. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bob. We are so excited to be here. And, I just wanted to introduce you to part of our team who is a resource to you. This is going to be a dialogue. We do have a lot of content to cover. And Matt, if you want to bring up our agenda, I want to introduce our team. We're going to go through some topics for about 40 minutes or so, and then we're going to leave time for discussion. If you have questions in between, just put them in the chat box, and we're going to try to answer those if we can along the way or at the end. We're going to spend a few minutes talking to you about some overall trends that we're seeing in technology, and then we're going to dive deeper into the finance function. We're going to talk about ERP or accounting systems, the reporting, budgeting, forecasting options that are available, and why you would want to extend your accounting system. And then we'll talk about data analytics and how you really use the power of that data for extended insights. And then we'll talk a little bit about what comes next. So when you think about technology, it's so important that we're not just thinking about the tools, that we're thinking about the processes, the people that are involved, and how to go about making change. And so that's kind of the overall scope of what we're going to talk about. I want to introduce you to our team so that you have an idea who's on the call today and our perspective. We do have quite a few other members of our team, so we may follow up with some specialists in different areas. Again, I'm Michelle Juliana. I'm one of the principals in our business applications practice. I've been at RSM for about 21 years, focused on our ERP and CRM solutions. And over the last 4 years, I've had the pleasure of leading our nonprofit consulting team, which covers a wide variety of services that we provide to our nonprofit clients. And our team includes some of the great members on the call today. I'll start with Joy Cruz. Joy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Joy Cruz. I sit in our Chicago office. I'm a director within our data and digital services group, specializing in business intelligence and data analytics. I've been with the firm for 3.5 years, truly focused on anything end-to-end data analytics and strategy and so on, and one of our national leads for nonprofits specifically. I'm very excited to be here. Abdul?
Thank you, Joy. Abdul Mohammed, a director here at RSM, also sit in our Chicago office, focused on FP&A tools around budgeting, forecasting, and reporting. Pass it on to you, Matt.
Great. It's great to be with you all. Matt Haggerty. I wear 2 hats at RSM. One, I am a senior analyst for the nonprofit and education industry, which means that I spend about half of my time doing research, thinking, writing on economic, technology, operational trends within the industry, and I'm excited to bring a snapshot of that for you all today to hopefully whet your appetite. And then the other half of my job, I work as a director in a finance and accounting outsourcing practice, where we manage full-scale outsourcing operations for a variety of nonprofit organizations. I sit in the Minneapolis office, and I know that several of you are from this area and would love to connect offline if we can. I'm new to the area. I recently relocated from Washington, D.C., and glad to be here.
All right, so just to give you a feel for our perspective, I did forget to mention today I'm in our Charlotte office. I split my time between Charlotte and Philadelphia, so kind of have a dual personality. And in terms of the type of work that we do for nonprofits, I just wanted to share this with you so that you can see the perspective of the people on this team and other specialists that we can bring to the conversation. We do a lot of strategy work. When we talk about digital transformation, it's how do you think about the vision that you have with your organization and how your people, processes, and technology can evolve to support that vision. And then we do a lot of implementation work around that technology. So we'll talk throughout the course of this hour around some of the technologies that we implement. And then in a lot of cases today, nonprofit organizations are choosing to outsource some of these functions. As Matt mentioned, we have a large group that outsources functions such as IT, finance and accounting, and we'll talk a little bit about the technology platforms that those teams use. So we can kind of layer in a lot of the different elements here, including cybersecurity, the technology risk, and even things like compliance around federal contracts. So, you know, as we come into an implementation of a new system and we start talking about indirect cost allocations and all the compliance reporting, that's an area that we really bring in our specialty team to help support those discussions. So enough about us. We're really going to talk now about what we're seeing with our clients. We work a lot with nonprofits of all types, but especially social services organizations like you are obviously throughout the country. So all of us that are in different geographies have worked with many of your counterparts. So Matt, I'm going to go ahead and let you kind of start broad, and then we're going to go a little deeper as we progress through the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. And we're going to kick off with a little activity that I hope is somewhat interactive. I've got a few statements that I'm going to put in front of you. And if the statement is something that you've said or thought or that you've heard within your organization, say the past couple of years, we'd love for you to put something in the chat, give us a reaction or an emoji of some sort, and we'll go there. And I'm just curious to see how well these resonate with this group. So here we go. Keep your eye and put your clicker close to the emoji button. The what do they call it? Yeah, the emojis. All right. Does this sound familiar? No one wants to go to the office to print checks and process mail, so now I have to do it. Anybody said that or heard somebody say that? All right, we'll keep going. The server crashed, so I can't access my software until they get it up again. I know I've said that in previous jobs, not so much here. Our senior accountant is leaving next month. I guess we'll have to start interviews again. Does that sound familiar? Surely nobody here is hit by the great resignation, have you? Okay, now the program manager needs their numbers. Can you send them to me so I can pass them along? Ooh, Bob's made it unscathed. Well done. That's a good sign. And finally, here's my last one. Will we have enough cash? Has anybody asked that question before? Yes. All right. Good stuff in the chat. Keep it going. Never have enough cash. That's right. Amen to that. So we see a lot of these issues. We're going to talk about how these can be addressed and how these questions, these comments, can literally all go away. That we can address through technology in a very accessible and affordable manner, ways to address all of these. And so we see this all the time, and I'm sure this looks familiar to you all, these key challenges that nonprofits like you all face. And again, none of this is a surprise to you, but we wanted to show and kind of like frame for you what we're doing here. We're not presenting technology, ERPs, CPM tools like for the sake of just upgrading or just advancing new technology. The reason that we're presenting these is because these can directly address some of the issues that you have, and it can do so in a way that's maybe easier to implement and to switch than you might initially think. So when we talk about building a strong digital foundation, these are really the keys, right? It's about consolidating. It's about making all of the data work together. We want to get to a place where nobody's having to type data or move numbers between systems or manually producing reports or anything like that, or even having to worry about internal control issues that might arise as you start to use multiple different systems and pull data from multiple sources. So here's the keys. And again, I'm not going to read verbatim, but you'll have this deck. But we do think that starting from a foundational element of understanding digital needs, digital requirements, and building off of that to adopt these platforms is really critical for all of your organizations across and all the organizations in the country. And so when we talk about modern systems, and that's where what we want to do. The modern systems are beneficial, not again because they're new, but because they actually solve real life problems and situations that you all see every day. And we want to talk through that in very pragmatic terms. There's no point in upgrading a system just for the sake of upgrading it if it's not actually going to make your operations better and help you to perform your missional function. So to go through briefly these trends that we're seeing in the industry, we see SaaS for finance, and I hope that you know what this means. It means software as a service, where software more and more is not purchased and owned, but rented. It's cloud-based, and therefore all of the upgrades, the continuation and the maintenance of this software platform that you use, whether it's CRM or case management or accounting, that it's all maintained by a third-party company, and then you're renting it or borrowing it back from them, rather than, for example, buying a product and having to download and buy patches that your IT team needs to implement on a quarterly, annual basis, or what have you. The second is data mobility, and this is something that's scary for finance people, right? It's like, how can I look at a spreadsheet on my phone? That's not a good situation for anybody. I don't disagree with that, but I do think that there are ways that we can add value and help our end users, our CEOs, our boards, our program users to have accessible data in a mobile fashion, and that's what we'll talk about that in a second as well. The third is actually my favorite is workflow automation, where we can utilize technology and tools that are actually more affordable than you might think to automate certain processes. And in doing so, we can use technology instead of people, which helps us to either save costs if we don't have to rehire for vacant positions, or to repurpose people that we do have to more productive uses to help them further the mission in other ways rather than number crunching or data entry. And one example, you see number 4, is the month close process. If we're not closing the month within 1 week of the end of the month, then we know right offhand that there's opportunity for improvement in terms of streamlining the month close, utilizing technology, and being more adept in that whole entire process. And finally, this concept of analytics and AI, we want to talk about as something that is attainable for this group, that each of your organizations can actually use get into analytics can take advantage of AI in a way that is really productive and useful and is not overly technical, is not overly difficult, right? But and Joy and Abdul in particular know how to do these things, and can provide that technical experience so that you as users and your other users actually can take advantage of these capabilities without a lot of difficulty. So to kick it off, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle to get through our ERP section.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. And as you're talking, I just realized you forgot to tell the audience that you were a finance director at a nonprofit prior to coming to RSM. So you.
That's right. I've been in your seats. That's right. And more on the Catholic side, most recently, rather than the Lutheran side, but social services. I was VP of Finance and Operations, and very much understand the world that you all sit in.
Yeah, so you've certainly used a lot of different accounting systems, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. That's my personal background going back 25 years or so, starting in the Great Plains and Solomon days and, on-premise software, which some of you very, very likely still have today, MIP or Mass 90, a lot of those applications are still out there, but as Matt mentioned, today, organizations are really moving those applications to the cloud so they don't have to worry about upgrades, security, accessibility, mobility, all these issues that are so hard to manage when you have your software on your own internal infrastructure. So one of the things, because we have a limited amount of time today, we are going to email you right after this meeting not only this PowerPoint, but also a document that we put together called the Cloud ERP Selection Guide. So Matt, if you want to move to the next slide, I just wanted everyone to be familiar with what you're going to get. We're going to talk about some of this today, but it's some questions for you to ask yourself. Are you ready to buy a new ERP system? And, when we talk about ERP, that means something slightly different to everybody, but it's certainly your core accounting and procurement. It can include your payroll and human resources applications. And even really, if you look at ERP and an extended capability to any of the applications that are connected in this ecosystem, like case management or your CRM capabilities, when's the time to make that change? Some common pitfalls that you want to avoid, what the industry is saying in terms of who the major players are, and we're going to touch on some of that. And then we go deeper into comparing some of the major solutions that we have a lot of experience with. And then finally, who do you work with to implement software like this, and what questions should you be asking? So there's so much content in this guide that we're going to email that to you right afterwards. Matt, the next slide really just covers quickly how to get started. And we'll come back to this if we have some time at the end, but it's, what are questions you should be asking yourself, and a little mini assessment to think about, is it time to not just upgrade the systems that you have to a modern cloud-based system, and to start thinking about for the future how to budget for that, how to plan for the people elements and process changes that you need to make, and how can you, by doing this, making this move, take advantage of a lot of these tools that are very affordable now for things like analytics and workflow automation. So wanted to just give you kind of a quick overview. When you think about the nonprofit ERP market, and we do a lot of selections for clients where we just help them actually look at what's on the market and who are some of the major players. This actually came from a selection that we did for a different social services organization, where we helped them look at what are the sort of the tiers of solutions. And this is terminology that really started from companies like Gartner that analyze the industry. And we look at their analysis as well as our own experience and that of others. And this depends a lot on your size. If you have any requirements for operating outside of the US, your budget, your complexity of the components that you need to include within this solution. So if you look at the tier 1, that's for the largest organizations, products like SAP, Oracle, Workday now, and then Microsoft Dynamics has a tier 1 solution called Finance and Supply Chain. And then tier 2 is really the middle market solutions that cover the majority of our nonprofit clients. And we say like kind of small to medium size because they can scale down and very far up depending on what you need. So, you know, what we're seeing in the solutions that we've chosen to focus on from an implementation standpoint, some of the key players are Sage Intacct, Oracle's NetSuite product, and then Microsoft also has a mid-sized solution called Business Central. And our selection guide goes into comparing those three. Certainly there are other nonprofit specific players like Blackbaud, Unit 4 are two that we also see and have been in the market for a long time. So these are just examples, but it's a place to start. You know, I know you have a lot of different organizations as part of your association, and I'm sure that you vary in terms of the services that you provide, but you very well, you know, you may have federal contracts or grants that you need to consider. You most likely need to integrate your accounting system with other software, whether it's case management or if you operate a healthcare or senior living organization, you probably have a billing system specific for that operation. You probably have a fundraising solution of some sort and a CRM component that manages your donors, your volunteers, anybody that you're communicating with. And then, of course, the people element, which is the largest part of what you're doing, managing their time, their scheduling, their payroll, all the human resources capabilities. And I'm sure there's a lot more that, you know, is not listed here, but this is just a starting point to add to our traditional nonprofit capabilities that you'll need, that additional things that you may be thinking about. And I'll be interested to hear from all of you what else is not on this list that maybe we want to add and talk about as a group. So just very quickly, I'm going to touch on the three solutions I mentioned just to kind of give you a feel for what we are seeing. The three most popular solutions that we see for nonprofit are Sage Intacct, very good. It's really the cloud accounting solution that's been in the market the longest, very good at grant accounting, multi-entity consolidations, integrates really well with lots of other cloud applications. So it's something that is just a really great fit if you need solid accounting, less expensive to implement than some of the other solutions because it doesn't have all the functionality embedded within it, within Intacct, but it has really great open connections to many other functions. The second one that we see quite often is Microsoft Dynamics Business Central. And we've been implementing Business Central quite a bit to upgrade from organizations that have used Dynamics in the past, whether it's, as I mentioned, Great Plains or Dynamics GP or Solomon, Dynamics SL, or if you just are heavily Microsoft oriented, you may have the Dynamics CRM platform. You may want to use a very tight integration with Microsoft Office, with your Outlook, and then the data analytics tools with Power BI. So if you want a full Microsoft solution, this is a great option. Microsoft now has its own fundraising and volunteer management solution that is available within that CRM platform. And then at RSM, we've developed a grant management solution to sit on top of that. So another good option. And then the third one is Oracle NetSuite. Larger organizations a lot of times are using NetSuite. It is very good in an international environment, multi-entity, has an e-commerce capability and more limited CRM, but it does have built-in CRM integrated within it. So it's the right fit in many organizations, especially both NetSuite and Business Central are very good if you happen to have any type of inventory that you need to track or if you happen to sell any products. So that was just a real quick run through. I wanted to make you aware that that guide goes into a little bit more detail, and we're happy to talk about any of these and our experiences with them as we go forward. But we wanted to go ahead and, after touching on these areas, talk about how important in your environment the reporting, forecasting, and budgeting tools are. So in some cases, the accounting solution that you choose either drives the reporting tools or vice versa. How you use your reporting tools can determine what type of accounting system that you need and kind of how they go together. It's just so critical. So Abdul, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about our approach here and what you've seen in our nonprofit environment.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So if we go on to the next slide. So an umbrella term for kind of reporting, budgeting, and forecasting tools is corporate performance management, or some refer to it as enterprise performance management. They both kind of cover the same areas. And there's three primary prongs within those budgeting and forecasting tools, or CPM tools. The first prong is budgeting and forecasting and planning at a detailed or granular level. More times than not, more granular than your chart of accounts within your ERP system, right? So for example, we can have detailed revenue planning, detailed workforce planning. So a lot of our clients in the not-for-profit space are planning by position, and they're reforecasting out their positions every single month. That's not really scalable or sustainable within Excel, right? That's why there's tools such as the ones that are listed here in the bottom that help with the budgeting and the forecasting. OpEx planning is a big area, especially using some drivers, right, within your OpEx plan. Along with, on this one, it really depends on the organization, if you're heavy CapEx or not heavy CapEx, but you could also bring in kind of your fixed asset listing into some of these CPM tools and then forecast out your depreciation on those fixed assets. Another piece that's becoming more and more important, especially from a cash flow perspective, is balance sheet and cash flow planning. A lot of our clients are starting to plan out their statement of financial position, I call it a balance sheet on here, along with their statement of cash flows. And the key thing from a budgeting and forecasting perspective is that workflow and collaboration, right? Really involving key stakeholders within that process and having them own their budget and forecasts. Can we go back to the previous slide really quick? Sorry. The other piece that goes hand in hand is kind of the reporting, right? So when you're budgeting and you're forecasting, you want to be able to report as well. A lot of our clients have their budget versus actual variance report built into the CPM tool. So we're bringing in data from your ERP, we're bringing in data from your payroll system, be it LT Pro or ADP. To build up those budgets, we want to be able to measure budget versus actual at that granular level as well too. Some key players in the mid-market space that we've seen, especially as of late, are a number of different tools. So one is Oracle EPM, that's tied really to the Oracle space. So Oracle NetSuite's a big ERP player that Michelle touched on earlier. Another big one that we're seeing in the space is Profix software from a non-for-profit perspective. They've been around for a number of years and have moved to the cloud, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. And then there's two additional ones. Solver is another tool. Solver has a very tight relationship with Microsoft. So I know, Michelle, you touched on Power BI and Microsoft BC and Microsoft CE. So Solver kind of fits within that ecosystem, right? So if you decided to go with a Microsoft-based technology, it might make sense to go with a Microsoft-based CPM tool. And then the last one that's kind of ERP agnostic would be Workday or Workday Adaptive Planning. Thank you, Matt. We touched on this slide, but essentially what we're trying to say here is, from a budgeting and forecasting perspective, you have different options, right? We can kind of do a bottoms up approach or even a top down approach, right? Where we can allocate to specific departments, specific programs based on different drivers, et cetera. And just some use cases, which I believe we touched on in the previous slide, is how have some of our non-for-profit clients used CPM. So the biggest one, especially as of late, is really to control kind of personnel cost and budgeting and forecasting for those positions. Another use case is really around matching expenses to revenue, especially when it comes to kind of indirect cost allocations, automating those and putting those within the CPM tool. Some of our clients even do that for their actuals as well as their forecasts and their budget. So the methodologies are the same across the board. And then the last one on here would be to create kind of a detailed revenue forecast for program services, et cetera. I am going to hand it off to Joy.
Thanks, Abdul. If we jump into the next slide, hopefully this looks familiar to you in terms of Excel. So Excel is probably one of my favorite tools to use when I need to do a quick merge of data from just different sources of information, and just merge it together when I don't have a centralized repository, because I'm looking for some quick ad hoc analysis that I need to do, or perhaps some great graphical interpretations or pivot tables. Some of the challenges, though, that I've run into deal with manual time it takes to actually process this information, format it in the way that I need it to, or just make sure that I'm actually looking at the right data. At times, information shared using Excel or perhaps just siloed processes with me that may be different. So if any of that resonates with you in terms of just receiving reports or perhaps different numbers for the same exact metric, I feel your pain. Excel is great, but there are some things about it that I wished when I was creating some reports back when I was in industry, where I was having the opportunity to drill down a little bit deeper, receive that executive dashboard look that helps me to just step in day one and be able to prioritize what I want to focus on for the day. Being able to drill down deeper, really get into that low line level of detail where needed to find where my problem areas are. So hopefully this is resonating with you. And if we shift into the next slide and we think about not only just from Excel, really what this means. Michelle took us through software and the digital side to applications. And Matt mentioned making data work together and making it work for you. And Abdul touched upon the financial side of the world and reporting. So I like how data plays a huge part in all of this. How do you leverage data as an asset beyond tracking it in applications that's going to fit your needs and your culture? Some of those buzzwords that you're hearing right now around executive dashboards and speed to insights, it really breaks down to what Michelle had mentioned previously. How do you extend your insights? How do you gain more value from it? How do you shift from modifying your information, merging it together, perhaps formatting it so that you could spend a little bit of time on analysis and making decisions? So not only viewing your data in an automated fashion, but just interacting with it, empowering both yourself as well as your teams and perhaps your constituents so that you're able to drill down deeper into some of that line level detail. Couple of questions, in terms of at that executive level, what do your CEOs want to see? How can you communicate to your board and your donors and your funders? Visualizations allow you that flexibility to communicate across multiple platforms and mediums. It really just helps you to extend and really showcase everything that you've done and all of the ROI that you've worked towards, all the campaigns and the success rate of it. If you're looking at metrics, the types of clients that you've served, and perhaps the numbers that you have, impact reporting and day-to-day operations that seem like it's so far-fetched to get from what was point A, and in this case, Excel, into these dashboards. It's actually something that's doable. It's not costly. And that's something that I know Matt wanted to touch upon or has touched upon as well in the beginning of this session. So thinking through readily available, self-service, accurate, standardized processes where you can rely on technology to be able to deliver the insights that you're looking for. Dashboards give you that ability. And in this case, it's not that difficult to get to. If we jump to the next slide and we think about some of those KPIs, in looking a little bit further and thinking through some of the things that you want to track at that high level, whether it's your donations and growth, whether it's case management information, how you can showcase really the ROI around the fundraising efforts and the campaigns that you're running, what types of, or who is actually looking at your website, how many people are clicking through it, what's your donation rates at? What is your year-over-year growth? Those forensic operational metrics that you're looking for to look back historically also allows you to think about maybe your forward-thinking metrics. What can you predict? How many members perhaps are you looking to gain in the next year? Where would they sit? What is the risk of people perhaps not returning? And if so, why? So asking those kinds of questions, being able to delve a little bit deeper into the metrics and the key areas of focus for you around program tracking, contract tracking, where's your client surging and what's that number look like? I could just keep going on metrics. I tend to geek out a little bit with data, so I apologize. But the excitement here is just sky's the limit. And it, again, is something that you can get to and is not a huge overhaul in level of effort and scope. So
I think, Joy, what you're trying to show here is really the future state, right? So we kind of started with Excel being this very well may be the world you live in today, but it doesn't have to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. And quite frankly, there are some cases where Excel is great for some things, but when you think about how you can self-service and interact with the data and delve a little bit deeper into it, that's where it might make sense to then shift into that visualization tool. So Michelle, you had mentioned the Power BIs of the world or the Tableaus, if that's ringing a bell for anybody. Truly, it's just what is that visualization tool for you? What is going to make sense for you and your culture? The idea here is data is agnostic, but the idea is for you to be able to understand and cultivate insights and analysis and do some analysis on that information. So how do you make it easier? Through automation of your processes, through being able to merge it together, knowing that you have multiple teams that are using information across the board. So how do you collaborate and work with each other to hit that common goal?
And one of the things that we find is the desire to have these type of insights doesn't always require a new system upgrade, right? So you might find that an interest in a new system is often driven by the need for better data. Sometimes we start with providing better data insights first, and then you may not need to, or that might delay a little bit the need to actually replace your underlying system.
That's a great point, Michelle, because another thing that came up and some questions that are usually asked of me is, do I need to hire a number of people in order to get where I need to be on the visualization side? Typically, no. You have a lot of citizen analysts that sit within your organization right now that are just looking for different ways to see information and more likely than not playing around with this already. So being able to leverage what you have already is a huge win here as well.
That's a great term, citizen analyst. I bet everybody on this call is a citizen analyst in some capacity or the other.
They're the good ones. They understand their data best.
Yeah.
So if you think about considerations and things to really think towards, why would you want to do this? If you want to shift that paradigm from 80% of modeling your information and 20% of analyzing to the opposite, where you're able to standardize and automate your processes. So at that point, you're able to spend 80% on analyzing, really getting to know your constituents, really understanding your information, both historically as well as some questions you want to ask of your data for future state. It's the art of the possible, sure, but it's also just forensically looking at getting to know you and your organization a little bit better. And to do that, you need your data. So can you trust it? Is it accurate? Is it consistent? Are your end users and team members using it in the same fashion? And if not, that's okay, but we just need to be able to collaborate and communicate together so we understand what each other's goal is and what their focus areas are. So I highlighted those 3 areas around enterprise analytics. What are across different multiple systems? How are you merging that data together? How are you looking at it operationally versus what kind of questions do you want to ask of your information that perhaps you never did before, but now you have a means to because you have a centralized environment that is automatically loading it in and merging your data from your different applications and being able to then predict or prescript. And then through that layer of governance, and I'm sure that's another term that's probably floating around there too, it's really just enabling trust and helping the teams to collaborate so that you have you have your data stewards. Those are typically your citizen analysts, those that know your processes and know your data, and they're able to speak to it, and they're able to talk about the quality of it and where it makes sense to perhaps streamline processes or make it better. Michelle, anything to add there?
No, I don't think so. I think you really covered it all. I mean, the predictive analytics are so interesting. And I think, you know, Joy and I talk about this a lot. If you can take all this information that you've gathered over many years across multiple systems and combine that with what you're seeing going on around you in the world and try to make some predictions, that can really make a big difference in how you're staffing, how you're talking to your funders about potential budget needs. It's really, really cool technology. So I would encourage you to learn more about it.
Yeah, I love it. It gets me excited.
Me too. All right, yeah. Matt, what comes next?
Great. Yeah. So what comes next? And so I hope you've heard excitement about these worlds and experiences and opportunities from the folks on this panel. We'd love to take a pulse check of the audience and do a little poll. And we don't have a polling mechanism here, so just put it in the chat. But so let's say a scale from 1 to 10. 10 being, this is all great. I'm ready to go. I'm in for all of this technology, the data, this optimization. Let's do it now. And then 1 is more like, I don't know. That this is a little bit uncomfortable to me. Like, we need to pump the brakes a little bit. I got a couple 10s. All right, sweet. Anybody else? Be honest. When I was in your shoes before coming to RSM, I think I would have been maybe in the 6 or 7 world, where like totally interested in conceptually, right? In an abstract way, it all sounds great. But then how do we do this? How can we actually move forward? This sounds like an overall daunting task. And that's what we're going to talk about now in the last couple of minutes, right? So how do we know that you're ready, right? And that's totally fine. 5s and 7s, cool. Thank you all. This is great. So how do we know? And again, this comes also from the ERP selection guide that we'll send out. But any of these factors are good indicators that you're ready, right? There's not like a switch or a silver bullet, right? Or a clear checklist you can go to. If you score, below 20, you're ready. If you score above 40, you're not ready, or anything like that, right? This is an ongoing evolutionary process where you have constant evaluation of systems, constant evaluation of needs, and hopefully a good partner to help you with that evaluation process. But so some of these are common signs that it's time to look, but this is far from a really robust checklist. And I know we as numbers people, we like to have kind of yes or no and scores and things like that, but this is really an abstract kind of program project management type of view for readiness than actual something that is more black and white. So this is a confusing slide, and would love for you to kind of digest it offline as we go. But really want to think about your entire function and your entire technology system as an architecture project, right? Where you're building off of the ERP to accomplish all of these various things that are shown here. And you can and really should at this point be accomplishing all of these in a really systemic, integrated fashion. And another way to look at this is this slide that I like to use in my world, where this is a sample. So we don't actually work with Lutheran Services in America under this structure, but as a sample, we like to put the ERP in the middle, and then the overlapping circles in this diagram show that all of these other ancillary systems directly and automatically integrate with each other, with the ERP really as the hub. And so that we're processing all of these activities within one integrated fashion. And then you also, maybe not you, but maybe your CEOs, your boards, your project managers, your program managers are really pulling the data straight from the CPM tool, if you have one, or if not, from the ERP and the reporting built into the ERP section. And that way you're not having to have multiple access points and touch points for your users who are already struggling to access and manage their financial data across the board. And this slide shows the work that I do, the half of my job that's in outsourcing, where from a labor perspective, we manage for a lot of clients the back end of a lot of these systems and process transactions, perform month close activities and things, so that we can better advise our clients. But certainly, if you don't outsource the function, this would be where your team, your finance and accounting team, sits to leverage these tools to perform these functions. And again, so that the users, the end users, really are getting only what they need without having to do a lot of self-service for themselves. And so finally, how to get started. This is really the right question, and this is where I hope we can jump into conversation, and would love folks to after we go through this list to share your thoughts, your questions, your experiences. The first thing is to identify the right people to drive change and plan for change management, right? So who needs to be involved in this process? The next is to take inventory of what you have today. What software do you have? What processes do you have? Are they automated? Are they manual? We're not solutioning yet. We're just identifying current state. And then I think this is really important. Who are your stakeholders and who are your supporters? Who do we need to make happy? Whose life can we make easier? Who is really enhancing the mission that we're all here to support? And who needs to leverage this data more effectively? And supporters as well, right? Who can help us? Who can help us to accomplish this? Then we think about what's our end state requirements and our vision. Again, we're not talking how to get there, but where do we want to be? What access to what data and what reporting do we want these people to have? Then engage with a partner that understands your need, an RSM or other firms like ours that can support you. And then together, collaboratively, develop a roadmap and a budget for system conversions as needed, right? And of course, you'll notice that none of these get started tools say, select which ERP you're going to use, design your system architecture, work on data automation. There's a lot higher level planning that we really think is important to take place first, to really make sure that stakeholders, the change management, and the technological capacity are all on board. So I will stop there. Our team is prepared to answer any questions you have. We've got 13 minutes left in the agenda, and appreciate everybody's thoughts and attention.
Hey, do y'all mind if I start with a question? Can you hear me?
Please.
Yeah, it's easier to ask than to type. So I sat in on a similar seminar probably 10 plus years ago that RSM put on about budgeting. And it was kind of just like this. And I didn't know anything about budgeting software and what kind existed out there. So what would be the next step for folks that are on here, because I've been through this, to get the process rolling with you all or with somebody else?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, and Abdul, obviously this is your wheelhouse, so feel free to talk about success stories that you've had. But I think it's really a conversation, right? Like firms like RSM and are invested in being long-term partners with clients and with organizations like yours, right? And and we understand the work that you all do, what you're trying to accomplish, because we have some industry experience and expertise, and we understand the technology, right? And RSM is not unique, and I think we are unique in this, to be honest with you, but other firms would do this as well. And so it starts with a conversation and a relationship, right? That we have to say and work together. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you trying to accomplish this? Can you get ROI, right, from this type of activity? Most of the time, the answer to those questions are yes, that this is worthwhile, that the investment, the payoff, the over time cost savings, and the decision-making enhancements are worth the initial effort. But it's really, having that conversation with somebody who understands the technical landscape and the work that you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish is really, I think, the key first step. And Abdul, have you in some of the budgeting work that you've done kicked off? How did those come to be, and how were those successful?
You nailed it, man. It always starts with a conversation, right? And we typically try to start with what are you doing today and what are you not getting out of your process today, right? In terms of what the next step is, just feel free to contact. I think we'll send over our contact information after the webinar. Feel free to contact anyone on this webinar, and we'll be able to connect you to the right folks.
Great. Thanks.
And Victor, do you want to come off mute and ask your question and maybe elaborate a little bit what you're asking about?
Yes, so I'm talking about the organizational change management aspects of any new system, but it's specifically about an ERP system, right? Like what we've been talking about. And how do you approach, hey, we're going to be doing your job a little bit differently. with these, updated processes and steps and stuff like that?
Dicker, that's a really important question, which is why we put it first, actually, on the list of what you need to think about in terms of next steps. And I think before you think about any technology, you really need to think about the people, or the type of people, and the characteristics of the people that you are going to need to drive the organization forward. And we have a lot of guidance we can provide around change management, but I guess the number one advice I would have would be to take it seriously. And we've seen way too many organizations that don't take the time, and they kind of just jump into technology and not thinking about the characteristics of the people that they're going to need in that core team. So there's like a core team that's going to be choosing systems and designing systems, and the time that's going to take, and maybe backfilling some of their roles or reassigning some responsibilities to make sure you have the right people guiding a process. But then also that you have the right people identified to manage the change management element, right? Which is, when and how do you engage people in the process? How do you build enthusiasm? How do you include them in defining requirements and testing and training? And there's a lot of lessons learned and experience that people that have been through this a lot can help you with, to try to avoid the same mistakes that lots and lots of organizations have made.
Yeah.
So,
Michelle,
it's a long conversation.
We were at a training last week, an internal training, and our management consulting team brought us a statistic that 50% of technology implementations end up failing within a year. And also, I think it was something like 30%, the average implementation goes 30% longer than it was planned for. And that's primarily related to change management, right? And so I know when we come in and think about these implementations from our side, regardless of the tool, change management is ingrained, right, in the implementation work and the planning that we do. There is a good case to be made if there are larger scale implementations and shifts that will take place across multiple systems, multiple departments, things like that, that having a project management dedicated resource is really useful. Sometimes that is contracted out to like RSM, to support our teammates. Sometimes that can be an internal project management person who really oversees a COO type role, who oversees the various pieces. But having that initial buy-in, the change management planning, the stakeholder assessments and things like that is very critical.
The other thing I would add is you have to start with the executive sponsorship. So the vision for a system change like this has really got to start from the top. And that communication and energy and enthusiasm has to be pervasive from your leadership team. So, if you're thinking about where to start, you really have to start with the buy-in for why are we doing this? What are we looking to accomplish? Make sure that everybody is on board from a leadership perspective so that you don't risk any kind of skepticism or negativity or lack of support, right from the start.
So, gotcha. Bob, I know you were hinging on that the 5-day close comment. Go ahead and ask your question. We could talk more about that.
Yeah. So to me, 5 days would be incredibly wonderful. It normally takes us about 15 days. We're heavily state and federal funded, and so to get our expenses in, payroll, AP, that's not so hard to get that done within a couple days of the month end. But it's the billing out of the grants and going through all the cost reimbursement contracts, pulling that out, putting it in the funder format. That's the piece that takes us forever. And I would love to know if there are other organizations that have streamlined that or cut that down and how they go about doing that, because that's the most labor intensive part for our close. And that's at least a full week's worth of multiple people doing multiple things to make that happen.
Yeah. And Bob, those are repetitive tasks, right? It's the same, more or less, kind of the same process every month. Pull the data from here, put it in this format, redo it, and then send it out to such and such, times 100.
Right.
So that's a key, kind of like a key indicator in my mind that this is a process that's ripe for automation. right? That with the right structure, and it starts with the ERP, right? It starts with the data being in the ERP in a timely manner, in a way that can be utilized and reported on quickly, and then through likely a CPM tool, something that Abdul would work on, to produce reporting that can be customized to a certain degree, at least, that within a click of a button, all these things are produced and out. And so where I think the primary manual piece you may want to keep is in reviews, right? But not in production. If you could, with the right data structure and data process automation workflows, right tools to sit on top of the ERP, most of that reporting can be set up to run relatively automatically.
Okay, thanks.
And if you want to talk more, yeah, we could talk more specifically in your situation if that would be helpful. We may not get 5 days to you, but I bet we could beat 15.
No doubt. Thank you.
All right, Kim has a question for the panel. What are the most common mistakes you see in system implementation, other than the culture piece that Victor alluded to? And that's for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. I think, we've talked about a few of them. I think certainly the people element is huge. I think probably underestimating the amount of time that's required for testing and dedicating the time. It's just something that there's never enough time for, and reallocating the responsibilities for the people that need to be involved with that during the key times for a project, right? So if you kind of look at a project calendar and looking ahead at realistically around schedules and vacations and testing and the whole calendar, and then really thinking hard about the time commitment is probably one of the biggest mistakes I've seen. And also not having that executive sponsor to be able to step in and make hard decisions, especially around design processes. And it's probably more than one person. It's probably a steering committee of people that can really step in and push things forward and make policy decisions.
I'll actually jump in there to say that one other thing that people tend to not really consider is around the reporting aspect. When you're going into such a large implementation like that, where are you going to get this information? Is it going to be a canned report? Is it something that you have to create some sort of workaround process for to now obtain that information in the same manner so that you can report out as needed throughout the month? So that's another consideration.
Great. Well, I know I speak for all of my colleagues here at RSM. This was really fun. Appreciate everybody jumping in, taking the time. We got the invitation to come see you in person in November, and hope that we can touch base at that point. And we'll send out, or you'll get all of our contact information as well, and we'd be more than happy to respond to questions directly, kind of understand your own personal services. And if it's not something that we specifically touched on, we're all connected pretty thoroughly within the firm and can make sure we pull the right resource for you. And again, going back to this concept of, this is about relationships, and this is about engaging the right people. So this is not selling, this is not billing fee for service at this point. This is really just wanting to help you all do the work that you all need to do more effectively. So Bob, any closing comments?
Oh, thank you all for the great information. I think this was a wonderful seminar, and this leads to great stuff down the road if people follow up with you when they have this need. I can certainly vouch for that. And we look forward to having you guys with us in November. And one more plug for LFMA. It's a great networking opportunity for CFOs and controllers in the Lutheran space. I've tapped on that network many a time, and it's nice to have people to go to that understand the issues that we deal with that are specific to government grants and contracts and the services we provide. So it's a pretty inexpensive way to get together once a year. So hopefully we will see some new folks in November.
Great. Well, thank you all again so much for sharing your expertise and experience with our group. And thanks to LFMA for your continued partnership. We're so glad that you all could join us today. So we will be sending out that follow-up email very shortly that has all of the contact information that you might need. But in the meantime, wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks again for spending an hour with us. We do appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Take care.